Greetings, everybody. I'm Jeremy, and this is my new house. Yay, new house. Okay. Put me aside. This is your story. This is your story, the story of how you worked in my life, and I just want people to see you in it. I want you to speak with your words. Amen. Okay. I want to start off by saying that my testimony is not about how bad I got or how close to death I pushed myself. It's continuously about the goodness and the faithfulness of Jesus to pursue me. Probably won't make a VH1 doing a behind the music on me, but first off, I was raised in the church, grew up in the church, went to Sunday school, and learned about Jesus as a child. I've been told that I was the most idyllic baby. So they say. They said I was really cute, and sociable and stuff like that, but I'll have to take them for their word because I don't remember. I was good around people. I didn't fuss. I was just a sweet kid. Then I hit 4 and started to get to the age where I started seeing the world for myself and started reacting, to it in such a way. I started pushing back against the things I perceived. By the time I was 5, I was in kindergarten, and I was becoming a nightmare child. When I was 5, I had an IQ of 140, and everything in school was beneath me. I didn't want to color, cut, and paste. I wanted to read and do things that stimulated me. I was the problem child of the mid-'80s. So after one semester of kindergarten in public school, they suggested to my parents that other arrangements be made for me. I can honestly say I was kicked out of school in kindergarten. So, that's saying something. So my parents sent me to a Christian school where I further learned about, stuff plus Jesus. It was here in kindergarten that God showed up. One fateful day in class, God revealed to me the nature of sin, death, hell, and Jesus. And I was scared to death and cried out loud in the middle of class, crying, I don't want to go to hell, I don't want to go to hell, I don't want to go to hell. So she sent me to the principal's office. Dare I suggest the implications? I can honestly say that visit to the principal's office, for once, was not because I had something done wrong. But there I had a fateful encounter with Jesus that forever changed the trajectory of my life. So I explained to him what God had shown me about sinners not going to heaven, and he told me that I can accept Jesus in my heart and be saved. I wanted that, and so I prayed with him. And I did. So little did I know that it would forever have me on a collision course with His grace, mercy, and blessing. Here I was going down the road of life from this point. I was fervent for the gospel, as much as a 6-year-old kid can be. Most of the time I found that Jesus begins immediately beginning a new good work in His people after accepting Him. But the years went on, and I was further not challenged in school, and the continuing pattern continued. For after 3 years at a Christian school, I began to show some of the same behavior patterns of talking out of turn and just being socially awkward and disruptive in class. So after 3 years of that, it was decided that I needed to be in special education behavior disorder classes. So I was in those from 3rd grade through 8th grade. I can be honest and say that to me from where I was standing. I didn't feel like I knew any better. My parents will attest I had a good heart, a heart that wanted good for people. It was as if I could not wrap my brain around how I was supposed to behave in a classroom. So fast forward to 6th grade. In August of 1990, I went for a bike ride with a guy that lived down the street. While I was out on my bike, I was hit by a minivan going 50 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, and I was almost killed. The paramedics were amazed that I had survived, and by all intents and purposes, I shouldn't have. But I did. My leg was broken. I had a fib fracture where both the bones, the lower right leg were broken. I had fractured my pelvis on both sides. The orbit of my eye was fractured, and there was head injury and brain swelling. Eventually, it all healed up, and I went back to school 6 months later in January of '91, clearly recognizing God's hand on my life, even though I was having difficulty understanding how I was supposed to live. Moving ahead 1 year, God's hand on my life became ever more present, and by May of '92, he had clearly spoken and told me to get baptized. So it was so. Make it so. And I was baptized at my church where I had been going as a kid, and God took an even more firm grip on my life and started showing me things that at the time made me feel like God was calling me to what I would describe as the 13th apostle. I could clearly feel God wanting to do something great with me and started praying to him constantly, like you would constantly talk to an imaginary friend. Would you like some tea, Mr. Bigglesworth? And being a 13-year-old kid who had very little knowledge of what the Bible taught or anything, I found myself praying for ridiculous things. But nevertheless, I was definitely seeking God's face. So, moving ahead to high school, I walked with the Lord until my sophomore year when I fell into a group of friends that smoked, drank, partied, and did drugs and stuff. And over the next 2.5 years, I started smoking and drinking and, tried a little pot. Although it's funny because I quickly realized that I didn't like pot. I didn't like the way it tasted. I didn't like the way it made me feel. And I quickly drew my conclusion that it scared me to want to mess with the chemistry in my brain. The analogy I had in my head was that of, this is my computer. Let's pour water on it and watch it malfunction. Because short-circuiting, an electrical device is fun, right? Could honestly say I could feel my brain malfunctioning, and I hated the feeling. I could objectively tell that I was not being myself. So that phase did not last long, and I'm like, yeah, I'm perfectly content to not smoke that. But drinking was fun, and I smoked cigarettes. By the time I got to my junior year of high school, I was pretty much a stubborn, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and nobody's going to tell me different kind of guy. Till one fateful night when my friends and I were having a party at my dad's house, which was the regular occurrence on Friday nights. He worked 40 miles away on second shift. Well, this particular night I was at my mom's house, and it was report card day. My mom was not pleased with my grades and told me I had to stay in that night. Plus, there was a frigid blizzard going on, but I was determined to get to my dad's house for a night of getting drunk with my friends. At first, I started walking into town. It was about a 3 or 4 mile walk in a frigid blizzard, but I didn't care because I was going to get there and I was going to do what I wanted, and nobody was going to tell me any different. Till my mom actually came back down the road driving back from the store, and she's like, "What are you doing out here?" And so she threw me back in the car and we went back home. So eventually, a buddy of mine, I got a hold of him, and he came out and picked me up while my mom left to go run another errand. And so we went over to my dad's house, and when my mom got home from running that errand, she noticed I was gone. After a while, called the police, and of course, the first place they were going to go was my dad's house. So they found us all and arrested us for possession and consumption, and at this point in my life, was such a stress problem for my parents. They basically reached their breaking point. And they're like, "Look, I don't know what we're going to do with this guy. So we got to do something." So they started praying, my mom started, they started looking into, okay, can we send this guy somewhere? Maybe boot camp, maybe. Will they take him? I don't know. So Jesus used this opportunity to get a hold of my life and smack me up a little bit and try to, slap some sense into me. It was at this point that I admitted where I realized I was not going to win this. I could see that Jesus had me where he wanted me, because I ended up going out to this Christian ranch in California, what they call a residential counseling program. And basically I lived there and did work program for like 8 hours a day, and it's just a place to remove somebody from their environment, put him in an environment saturated with Jesus, and Jesus just starts playing doctor and picking and working at you until he gets you to where you're ready to go back into the world, so to speak. So it's one of those kind of places. And it became quickly apparent to me that I did not know the wanderings in the wilderness from David fleeing Saul in the wilderness to the exiles. I felt God impart to me a need to become familiar, even if it was to the point of understanding historically what the Bible lays out. History had always been an intense fascination of mine. So, after I'd been at the Christian Ranch for about 14 months, I had managed to finish high school, get my degree, and read through the Bible for the first time from beginning to end. After getting prayed out and sent back home, it was clear to me I want to go to Bible college because this Jesus thing is the only thing worth going, really. So, toward the end of my senior year, I'd applied at Lincoln Christian College, now a university in Lincoln, Illinois. I'd spent the summer back home in Illinois continuing to read the Bible, going to Bible studies with people I knew from high school that I hadn't seen in over a year, and to boast on the work of God, the work God had done in my life. And they were all amazed at the understanding of the Bible that God had given to me. I was recruited to help with a week at a Christian camp called Little Galilee for a week in July, and come August I started Lincoln Christian College. My first semester in college was more difficult than I expected, simply because college workload is more rigorous than people expect it to be. But I managed to make decent grades. My second semester I started playing in a band and hanging out with my friends, and we started to go to Bloomington, which I would end up live. About a half-hour drive away to hang out with people and drink and party and, stuff. And we claimed that we did all these things in the name of being all things for all people and to witness and tell about Jesus. But really we were just going out to party and stuff like that. And we wrapped it up nicely in a justifying excuse. Eventually, to me and all my friends washed out of college, and I was really burnt out on the whole academic thing. While doing homework, writing papers, turning in assignments on time, and it was very overwhelming to me. So I took a year off and came back home, worked at a local Cracker Barrel, and this was an opportunity to get back in touch with Jesus. Stay involved at my church and work a job and just do practical life ministry. In 1999, after working at the Cracker Barrel for a year, I got fired and spent the next several months trying to find a job and decided to go back to college. Try that again in the fall. After 3 months, college proved to not be the thing. I failed out having some difficulties I'd been having, not being able to sleep at night, not being able to manage time very well, not being able to make it to class because my internal clock was backwards. Again, I found myself spending the next year trying to find work, being unable to. I thought maybe if I go back to that ranch in California, so I went back there. And after 2 months, I found myself on a bus going back home. That didn't work either, so we tried college again. And that blew up in my face. I tried getting a job again, and that blew up in my face. Tried going back to this ranch, and that did not work either. I was very frustrated, incredibly frustrated. I didn't know what I was supposed to do and fell into a great depression. Upon returning from California, I spent the next several years stripping away everything I've ever believed about Christianity and God. And I told God, look, I don't know what I'm actually supposed to believe anymore. I need you to show me what truth is and how it works. And I spent the next several years trying to find, because basically I had acknowledged that I had come to a point in my life where everything I believed was from my parents' faith, or from the faith of my friends, or from the faith that I was being spoon-fed at church. And I realized I can't live by that anymore. It doesn't work. I needed to understand for myself why I believe, what I believe, and I need to be convicted by it. And so I said, God, look, I don't know what I believe anymore. I need you to show me what truth is and how it works. So I spent the next several years trying to work, hold down jobs, write music as I became a prolific songwriter and recording artist. The music part flourished, however, the job front did not. I found it increasingly difficult to deal with empathy and tension and the inability to seemingly do a good job for an employer. It didn't help that I could not control when I was able to sleep and when I could stay awake, and it just caused greater anxiety and the feeling of being paralyzingly overwhelmed. In 2005, after working, I finally caught a break, and my mom opened a coffee shop in downtown Peoria and hired me as a dishwasher. And, and that gave me an opportunity to, get some advances. It was a family business, so I believed in it, and I stepped up my game, and I was willing to do whatever it was that needed to be done. When we hired people that continually kept dropping the ball, I stepped up and I picked up the slack. I made sure stuff got done. When I first got hired, I was just a lowly dishwasher. By the time we eventually had to close the store, and by the time we closed the store, I was the one getting all the cleaning done. I was the one getting all the food prep done. I was the one ordering the truck. I was the one taking inventory. I was the one baking all the baked goods. I was still washing dishes. I did all the closing cleaning at night. I did all the gathering of money at the end of the business day at night, and basically I was doing everything because we had a store filled with people that just kept dropping the ball. But eventually, due to some problems, we were forced to close the store, and I went another 8 months without being able to find work. Finally, in the summer of 2006, God came to me and said, "Is it worth?" This is a direct quote. I'll never forget these words till my dying day. God came to me and said, "Is it working for you? Living your life your way?" I said, "No, it's not really working." And God said, "Are you ready to try it my way?" I said, "Yeah, it's got to be better than this." Here, let me explain. I was at the lowest point I think I've ever been at. I was not looking for God I was, but I wasn't. I was praying, "Hey God, I know you're there. If you want me to work, if the Bible teaches that a man should work, then I need you to give me a job and give me the ability to keep that job." And it never happened. It took me anywhere between 8 and 10, 12, 14 months in between jobs for me to find the next one. And I would pray, "God, I need a job. I need a job. You know I need a job." Is a man supposed to shrug off the responsibility that the Bible teaches? So I need a job. I need you to give me one, and I need you to help me keep it. And over the years, this was not happening, and I couldn't understand it. And it was trying to blue screen my faith. That's a term that God gave me. When you push your faith into a realm, or when somebody pushes your view of God into a realm where you're like, "No, God isn't like that. I don't know what to do." And your brain basically blue screens over it. Think about it. It'll come to you, and you'll get it. So here I am. I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready to do it your way, God." And the whole working a job thing, that'll come up again. But yeah, it's got to be. And so it was like salvation all over again. I had a sense of renewal in my spirit, and it just felt magical again. Got involved at my church. I could literally, anyone who has ever experienced a near-death tragedy will attest that when you come out of it, the world and everything, it seems brand new, and everything has this newness and magic and wonder to it. It's like you're a little kid again, and everything is beautiful. And I experienced this again in 2006. I got involved in my church again. My pastor even exclaimed, "I wondered where you were. There weren't any cigarette butts outside." This isn't the whole thing. So, basically, So 2006, I finally turned it all over to God. And about a month after this happened, a job just fell in my lap. And it showed me that if God wants you to have a job, if God wants to make a point by giving you a job and saying, it's I that gives and takes away, it's I that blesses and strengthens, it is I that does good things for my purpose. And we don't always understand what God's purpose is. But in this case, it seems pretty clear to me that God wanted me to do it His way. So I got a job. I got a part-time job at a place that I used to work. It was this Best Western Motel. It was barely a restaurant called the Ashland House, and it was part of the hotel. And, it had a bar in it and whatnot. And so I got a part-time job. I got hired on, and basically they worked me every Saturday night to do wedding gigs and banquets and stuff like that. They had a banquet center there. That's basically what the Ashland House was. It was a bistro and a bar and a banquet center and a hotel. And so I worked in the kitchen. I washed dishes, and I worked there every Saturday night in the fall of 2006 for about 3-4 hours a night. But I can see where God stripped it back and brought it back to the most basic thing. And yes, hey, I was finally able to afford my own smokes. I was able to afford my own coffee. And, and something that I left out is when God reached out to me, I was at my all-time low. And I was so low. I was at a point, and this is horrific, but I was at a point where enough demons had started speaking to me that I felt like I was never going to make it. I was never going to be worth a damn. I was never going to be able to do anything with my life, and my only resort, and I believed it, was to break into people's houses, steal their money or stuff or whatever, kill them in their sleep, and then burn down the house. That was my plan. That was my demonically influenced plan. That was the only way I was ever going to be able to live life, was to take from people and destroy the evidence because I didn't care. And it got so bad that I would go to bed at night and I would lay awake, and these visions of these things would not cease, and they would race through my mind until I couldn't stand it anymore. Mental pictures of murder and bloodshed and fire, and then that's when God reached out to me and said, hey, is it working? So that gives you a little bit of context. No, it's not working. I'm laying here having demonically, inspired visions of murder and blood and fire in my mind that I cannot get rid of. So he gets me this part-time job at the Ashland House, and I'm working every Saturday, and it's not enough. I can't get the registration renewed on my van. I can't afford insurance, but I can afford, God is it's one step at a time. I could afford my own smokes, and I could afford my own coffee. Something else I was doing is I was stealing money straight out of my dad's wallet every night after he went to bed. Because when you need your needs, you stop caring who your choices affect. You can, anyone who has ever lived in the drug addict world, they know that this is how it is. You need what you need, and when you can't meet your own basic needs, you will steal and take from anyone. Even your own mother, your father, it doesn't matter. So here I am. I'm demonically inspired to murder and kill people and burn down their house and take their stuff and whatever. And that was, and I had these demons saying that was how you're gonna have to live. And God stepped in, thankfully, and He rescued me from that. And He's like, let's do it my way. I'm like, okay, so I'm working at the Ashland House. And, and my basic needs are being met. And, I can't think. I can't hold my thought. Okay, cigarette butt. There weren't as many cigarette butts outside. By this point, I was starting to feel the weight of a life where every time I went out and tried to do what was clearly expected to me from God, the church, and the Bible, it was met in dismal failure. Failure became such a common word in my life that I started identifying with it. It wasn't until years later that I would start having to refer to them as unsuccessful attempts, so I would not be so much as identifying with being a failure. The weight of it began to get very heavy. I started experiencing the oppression of spirits. Spirits, for lack of a better word, I should be able to do anything I want in life, and when I can't, I will crush and kill people to get what I want. I became overwhelmed by the desire to take what I wanted in life by force. I started talking about it with my closest friends, and it started scaring them off. Speaking of plots I was hatching, to use magic and the force, and to call down fire and lightning and ice, and set up my own empire, for those of you who are familiar with Star Wars, and then hold the entire world ransom with the threat of nuclear holocaust. The scariest part was I was fully convinced I could accomplish this. I got to a point in 2006 where I would dream night after and having daydreams about, doing this stuff. I explained that, and God showed up. Didn't I already? Alright, I'm just going to go with it. So up until now, I'd previously been a child who was unable to understand why certain behavior is unacceptable, and now I'd become an adult who was unable to be responsible for myself, and God came to me on a summer night in 2006, July 2006. He said, it's not working, and I said, I'm sorry, is what working? And he said, your life, it's not working. I was forced to say, no, it's not working. Why is this all repeated? Are you ready to try it my way? He said. I said, your way? Well, I guess at this point I'm ready to try anything. So I set myself right with God, or rather, He set me right with Him. I fully put myself in His hands, submitted to and prayed, God, whatever it is you want to do it. Immediately, I was relieved of the crazy thoughts to go kill people and take their stuff. If anyone has ever had a near-death experience, I explained all that. About a year, God started revealing Himself in a very personal way. He started revealing to me through my understanding of quantum physics, and revealing to me the nature of the heavenly places and how He sits on the throne outside of time and space, and that creation is a bubble of time and space that He created. He revealed deep things to me, revealing the nature of existence and on and on. He also brought me back to the understanding I had of Him and the Bible before all this adult life nonsense started to distract me. He reminded me of all the scriptures, and all of a sudden I knew and remembered everything I'd ever learned about them, up to the point where I kind of walked away. Basically, where I had been in the past, God brought it all right back up and in context. It's like I was that person I was when I was 5 again. I was that person I was when I was 14 again. I was that person I was coming out of that ranch going into Bible college again. And I was me as an adult all at the same time. It was like this was the perfect, it's like God was saying, this is who you are in me. And over the years, He began teaching me more about the Bible and what it means to live by it, walk in it, what it means to have it written on your heart. After a month after, the boss thing, okay, Best Western Hotel, I talked about that. So over the next year, I worked there every Saturday night, and the world was still full of magic. It was surreal, to say the least. This went on until about October of 2006. When I prayed, God, will you give me someone I can love and cherish? And interestingly enough, God chose to answer that prayer and sent a girl to me online. And So I had someone to love and cherish and treat like a daughter of the king, so to speak. So we started dating in October of 2006. That doesn't mean that the magic and the wonder went away, but you know, he just added a girl to the mix. And by March of 2007, we were adding an Irish pub onto the hotel. That gave me full-time work, and I was able to get my vehicle, my van at the time, insured and registered and stuff. And so I was able to start hanging out with my friends and going and doing karaoke and taking my girl out. However, by June of 2007, that job was taken from me. Let me reiterate, because I see it very clearly. God has explained this to me. Every job I've ever had, I didn't lose that job. God said, okay, you've worked at that job long enough. I'm trying to teach you something here. Goodbye. God gives and God takes away, and sometimes He lets us screw things up. But this job was taken away from me. And so ended the first year of you know, walking with God again. And now it was time to suffer for Him and have life not make sense at all. So June 2007, He took that job from me. My girl and I broke up, and I found myself in a homeless shelter. At the Peoria Rescue Mission was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I would say that it has scarred me in a traumatic way, and I would say that about any time I've ever had to be at a homeless shelter. It scars me psychologically. After about a week of that, God gave me an opportunity to make $100, so I did and got myself out of there and found myself getting out for a while and to get away from it all. So I drove up to Iowa, where my biological family lives, and I'd never really gotten the chance to know. So I got up there, and with about a week, I had a job at Hardee's and worked there for 2 months. Upon losing that job, I cried out to the Lord, "Where are you? What is going on? This isn't supposed to happen. Where is the Almighty Lord that I've heard that you are? And if it is good for a man to work and have gainful employment and take responsibility for himself and pay his own bills, then where are you, God? Why aren't you making this work? That's your job, isn't it? It's what you do." So upon losing that job, I felt very defeated, and I had to move out of this penthouse-like apartment I was living in. It was only for like $86 a week, but still. It was a really nice apartment in a tiny little town in Iowa. And I had to move in with my cousin, and I stayed there for 6 months. By about October of 2007, I found this old friend that I haven't seen since California. We started talking and ended up falling in love again. She suggested that I move out to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I prayed about it. Though I was really frustrated and mad with God that I had lost a job, I was mad and frustrated that it didn't make sense why what was happening, but I still trusted that God was sovereign and that God was good and that He was going to work it out. Romans 8:28, that God brings all things together to work for the good of those who love Him. So I still wanted to trust that God knew what He was doing. So I prayed about it, and God clearly said, "Go to Albuquerque." So I went out to Albuquerque, and the day I got there, she changed her mind, didn't want to be with me anymore, and her lesbian mothers didn't like me either. So guess what? Homeless shelter again. I felt so defeated and distraught. I was literally sick to my stomach. I had no energy. I didn't want to do anything or have to go anywhere. I was miserable. Finally, after enduring the homeless shelter for 3 months, my 2008 tax refunds came, from working full-time at the Ashland House, and it was enough for me to get into my own apartment and pay a few months up rent. So here I am, 1,700 miles away from anything and everyone I ever knew, and my life got pulled out from under me again. Traumatic, to say the least. But though through it all, I stayed committed. to God, and part of this church out there called City on a Hill, and they started filling my head with sound doctrine and truth about what the Bible taught. And the Holy Spirit was saying, this is right and sound, listen to it. So I kept going to this church, became part of a community group called the Artists Guild. We were basically 15 really tight friends that went out and did stuff together, camping, fundraising, whatever, everything in between. It was a very positive time of my life. That July I turned 30. Oh my gosh, that seems like forever ago. And I received an insurance settlement from when I was 12 and hit by that minivan. I was able to pay my own bills and live off that money for the next 2 years. While 2008 was a great year full of fun things and friends and doing stuff, 2009 was kind of a darker year. Though God had me get another car, our friendships waned and everybody kind of fell away from each other. And City on a Hill became Mars Hill Church Albuquerque campus, Mars Hill under Mark Driscoll out of Seattle. So I became obsessed with learning the teachings of Mark Driscoll. His sermons were true, solid, and sometimes funnier than the stuff that was on TV. I used to sit around and listen to him preach the Word of God for hours. Then the now Mars Hill Church Albuquerque was starting to push people out of the church. They were getting big heads and going to people and saying they were unbiblical and making people feel unwelcome. They came to me and said, you're not working, you're living in sin, that I needed to get a job. Now, I will be the first to admit, I want to do all things that are godly and worthy of good and that are beneficial, but my experience walking with God has left me afraid to have to rely on a job to pay bills and make ends meet, because it's never worked. It didn't work when I tried to do it of my own strength. It didn't work when I turned around and trusted God, saying, I need you, oh powerful God, to be my strength in this. And it didn't work. God said, I'm not doing that. That is not my plan. It's like a fragile flower that one day blooms beautifully, but the next is thrown into the fire and is no more. If I had to rely on my ability to find and keep a job, I'd never be employed and I'd never have any money. So I basically told the church, look, you're wrong. You misinterpret the Bible and you put a yoke on my head that doesn't belong there. You're trying to build a perfect people church, but the Holy Spirit showed me this. So I gave them a woe to you speech. They didn't listen and basically said I couldn't come back. They didn't outright say that, but they tried to shut down opportunities to make me want to walk off. You know, like when your employer tries to make you want to quit your job. It was like that. However, a few days before this, God had already told me, I'm sending you to another church. So my bags had already been packed. By this time, it was the summer of 2009. I had basically concluded that this is where God had brought me to build my own life. And soon after, a cousin I had never met friended me on Facebook, and we became besties. That's the term she used, silly girl. So anyway, God announced that, hey, I'm moving you to Bloomington, Illinois. I said, you are? Really? God is like, yep, I'm moving you to Bloomington. You need to remember, though, I am moving you, and this is my plan. And my plans are perfect and always happen the way I say they will. I said, okay, and one day I was driving down the road, and all of a sudden my car starts overheating. So I called this guy to come meet me in a parking lot just off the exit. I was on, and sure enough, there was a coolant leak. There was coolant leaking out. So I had it towed to a mechanic, only to find that a fist-sized hole in my radiator that was not there when I left. God spoke up and said, remember, this is my plan. Trust in it. So I was not anxious. I did not freak out, and which is totally what I would have done at this time. So I'm sitting here not knowing how I'm going to get back to Bloomington after all. Then my cousin sent me a check that her and her fiance pulled together. They sent me a check for $859, which covered the cost of towing my car, getting everything fixed, and having it optimized and ready to drive it across the country. All was ready to go, and the day came, and I said goodbye to my closest friends, and I was on my way back to Bloomington. I arrived in Bloomington, Illinois, and my aunt told me that I could stay at her house for 9 months to get my feet on the ground and into my own place and stuff. A month into it, she said I couldn't stay there any longer. I was a bad influence on her kids and stuff. So guess what? Homeless shelter again. This time 8 months. I got a job at the Cracker Barrel washing dishes and doing night maintenance. And finally, in July of 2010, I was able to get into my own place. I was barely able to afford my bills and rent and the cost of living. After living there a few months, it became overwhelming to work a job that I sometimes couldn't afford every bill, and I freaked out and quit. I had no income and spent the next year trying to get another job and found nothing. And with every job I applied for, hearing them say we're not hiring right now was a stab through the heart. It hurt. It hurt so much. I finally said, screw it, I'm done. I'm done. Every time I walked in to apply for a job, I'm basically laying myself on the altar saying, I have no way to afford anything. Will you please pay me to do something? And when they said no, it was like a slap in the face. They might as well have been saying, no, we don't want to hire you. I'd rather watch you be unable to pay your bills and homeless again. So I basically thought to myself, all those people can go screw off. Screw them. Stupid people, I don't need them. So I sat around my house and found things I enjoyed doing and refused to put myself in a position that would anger me, where people would anger me because I was done dealing with it. I refused to put myself in a situation where stupid people might make me angry. So I stayed in my house most of the time just chilling with God and the Bible and my Mark Driscoll sermons and some other sermons and just my Bible and teaching. I was resolved to tell the world I don't need you in your sinful, pagan, heathen, stupid, godless ways. God continued to teach me about himself, about the Bible, and about what life looks like through the lens of all that. By 2012, it became clear to me, oh my gosh, God is building me into a Bible teacher, and he has been for decades. Well, that is certainly most clear. So here I am in 2012, unemployed, and all the while God says to me, and the only thing God has ever said to me through this whole thing is, my grace is sufficient for you. God, why can't I hold down a job? My grace is sufficient for you. God, why can't I find a job? My grace is sufficient for you. Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? The Bible says we're supposed to do these things. My grace is sufficient for you. That's all I ever heard. Finally, in August of 2012, God told me, I was sitting on the toilet. And God came to me and said, I never meant for you to be so impoverished. It is not my plan for you. You need to find Steve Williams and hire him as a disability attorney and go get on disability, SSI, whatever. So I thought, who's Steve Williams? I'd never heard that name before. So no sooner than I walked into my living room, I noticed my phone book was upside down on the floor, and on that back page was a huge ad for Williams and Swede disability attorneys. I thought, what do you know? That's interesting. So I kind of put it on the back burner, and about a week later, I was at the Center for Human Services where I got my mental health care, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and I heard a woman speak up about Steve Williams being the best disability attorney in the area, and so I'm like, I think there's something to this. So when I got home, I called him up and asked for a consultation, and my pastor gave me a ride there and sat in on the consultation. And so I'm sitting here and I have no income, but occasionally I get a couple bucks for things, and I'm grateful to God. And so every dollar I got, I tithed to my church. God was clearly teaching me, hey, tithing is important. Don't obey 99% of what I command you and disregard something. I need you to obey everything I command so that your life may be good and go well with you. So I didn't shrug off of that. It's like, here I am, I have no income, and I tithed. So I tithed my food stamps. My church was a church that donated food and give it to local shelters and food pantries. So I donated my food stamps. And every dollar, if I found a dollar on the road, I tithed 10 cents. And God got me through all that. And in the end, I waited 2.5 years and finally got on SSI. Upon meeting with my attorney regarding the hearing, he told me, I'm sorry, but you're getting the judge that has the lowest rate for approving disability cases in the country. You are probably not going to win this case. Upon leaving that meeting with my pastor, God spoke to me and said, you're not going to have that, judge.
I'm going to give you a different judge. And I thought, okay. And I told my pastor about it, and he said, okay. And we kind of brushed it off. And so the day of my hearing comes, and my pastor drives me to Peoria. And guess what? I walk in, and my attorney meets me, and the first thing out of his mouth is, guess what? Good news. You have a different judge. And I looked at my pastor, and we laughed. We laughed out loud. And so, because we knew. And so January 2014, I finally had a means of income and paying my bills. And at this time, God said, I have freed you up to spend your time doing whatever you want to do with yourself. You do not have to worry about how you're going to have to pay your bills and rent and stuff like that. He had also been teaching me through numerous things on how to be generous and how you cannot outgive God. And I would dare anyone to try. If God gives you 10 dimes and says, I only require one of them, you may have the other 9. And that's generous. And if the Holy Spirit starts working in you, and this is entirely possible, it's perfectly okay to start wanting to give God 3 and 4 and even 6 dimes instead of just the 1. Eventually, a generous person wants to give 9 dimes and keep 1 for herself. Because this saying is true. Daddy always has more. God, who owns all things and gives out to everyone what he deems fit. If you are generous, and no matter that God can always give you more than that, he will. The more you increase your giving, the more he will increase what you have. For those of you who know, that's the Rick Warren strategy. Why did God have me write this book? Because he's already tested me and knew I would give it generously, the money. So for the last few years, God is filling my heart and mind with the Bible. I have treasured your word in my heart so that I might not sin against you. Psalm 119:11. So here I am, just trying to live my life fully consecrated to the Lord, aware that it doesn't take much on my plate for me to feel overwhelmed, and that I have had to learn that sometimes it's not about God delivering you from things you struggle with or things that you wrestle through, but instead he finds a way to allow you to fight through it. Sometimes, if you say it hurts when I move my arm like that, God just says, then don't move your arm like that. And everyone carries the yoke that God chooses for them to carry. And sometimes it doesn't always look the way you think it should. So here I am just trying to be a man of God, doing what the Lord gives me to do and saying what the Lord tells me to say. And going where he tells me to go. And fortunately, I've been blessed that the Lord has saw it fit to have me live here and to have me live there so I can learn and observe people in different areas of the country and see cultural differences. And now here I am, and God has sent me here to Kentucky. And I am still waiting to do all the things God has shown me he is going to do. Yes, I honestly believe I have come to that place where God is going to plug me in and this stuff is going to happen. And more even. And through all my struggles, I can honestly say God is good. He may not always make sense. He may sometimes go against everything you think you know about him. But that's why he issued the order to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but submit to him in all your ways, and he will make your paths straight. This verse God has been drilling into my head over the past year, showing me how it works and in different ways that it works and what you can take away from it, and that it is trustworthy. It has been the cornerstone verse for my entire year of 2015. And that's it. Thanks a lot.